Good morning, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So, in today's video, I thought I would talk a little bit about Gresham's law and how that's going to be playing out in today's economy. A lot of times I get asked the question about how the BRICS nations are going to de-dollarize and knock the United States off the pedestal of being the world reserve currency. And a lot of times when I hear the arguments for the BRICS nations and how they are going to back their currency with gold or do their own transactions within their sovereign currencies, I don't think a lot of people take into consideration how Gresham's law plays out when it comes to the common used reserve currency or just the currency that is being deployed within the economy. Now, to understand Gresham's law simply is to think about it with cash in one hand, like paper dollars, and gold in the other. Now, if you can imagine that I'm a retail salesperson selling, a vacuum cleaner, and you're going to come and purchase this vacuum cleaner from me, and you have cash in one hand and a gold coin in the other, and you say, which one of these are you going to accept? And I say, hey, I'll take either one of those. I don't care. I'll take cash and I'll take gold, whatever you want to give up. And now I really have to ask, are you going to be giving up that gold coin? Right? Or are you going to hand over the cash and put the gold coin in your pocket? Most likely you're going to be putting that gold coin in your pocket because everybody knows that the cash is really just paper that doesn't really have any kind of real value behind it, and it's just there for making the transaction take place. But gold is real. It's used for industrial use, it's used for jewelry, it's used for storing of value. It's been in use for 5,000 years. It's like gold is definitely something of value. Paper, not so much. So most of the time you are going to find that gold gets hoarded away. And that's going to take place regardless of how it is that people say, no, we are wanting to use gold. That's fine. You can want to use it all day long. But if there is another form of currency out there, the bad currency will chase out the good. And that's what Gresham's law is stating. Now, Gresham was way back in like the 1500s, right? Like 500 years ago. And he had noticed it through coin debasement. And that coins that were clipped or had a debasement of metal to it would then be moved into circulation, in the unclipped coins or the currency with a higher value metal to it that wasn't devalued with other base metals would also be hoarded away. So the coins that were put out into circulation were essentially a bad currency. Clipped coins being that they actually clipped off a little bit of the coin's edge and kept that for themselves, whether it be a silver coin or gold coin, and then put that coin back into circulation minus a little bit of the shavings that had been removed from it. Well, that's a lesser valuable coin. It's bad currency in a sense comparatively to a coin that had no clipping done to it. Same thing with the base metal coins, that if you have a silver coin but then you start adding cheaper metals to it in order to provide more currency out there, the coins that are made of solid silver as opposed to the ones that have been debased get hoarded away, and the debased coins then move into circulation. We even find the same example occurring today with silver coins from the United States. 1964 and earlier, silver quarters and dimes were made of silver. It's very difficult to find these things in circulation, as most people who recognize them have pulled them out of circulation. So now silver coins, if you think about it, really held on to a lot of value. If you consider a silver quarter from way back in the day, you remember Grandpa and your old man saying from way back when that a quarter would buy a gallon of gas. Well, you think about it right now, a silver quarter, the cash value of it could get you a gallon of gas. So this is how Gresham's law works, is that if there is a good currency out there, it is essentially going to get hoarded away as the bad currency gets moved into the economy. The BRICS nations are going to face this exact same scenario. Even if they had a good currency out there, this gold-backed currency, if there is another form of currency that's available, the gold will be hoarded away, and the bad currency will move into circulation. Now, there is an opportunity for that good currency to come into circulation, that people could be using this gold-backed currency. However, in order for that to occur, the currency that is being used today would have to completely collapse and nobody accepting it. At that point, the good currency can come in. This is Thiers' law. So you got Gresham's law, where bad money chases out good, and then once the bad money completely collapses, Thiers' law kicks in and good money chases out the bad. But until that actually occurs, you're going to find it very difficult for the BRICS nations to be introducing a good currency. It's not going to happen like that. The bad currency has to collapse. Now, if the BRICS nation was to replace the dollar with their own form of fiat currency, saying, no, we are going to be doing our own transactions in our own sovereign currency. Here's the problem that most people don't recognize when it comes to this situation where the sovereign nations are going to be providing their own currency to do transactions, is that most of them want to be industrious nations, meaning that they produce and save. Producing, saving nations are strong economies. This is what the United States did back in throughout the first part of the century, well, earlier last century, I guess I should say, through the early part of the 1900s, going all the way up into the 60s, the United States kept growing as a manufacturing power state. We produced and sold the wonderful stuff that the world consumed, and the world sent us their gold. We consumed the gold of the world. We had it. And then when it came time to redistribute that gold back out there to the rest of the world, we severed ourselves from the gold standard and we started issuing out fiat currency to the entire globe. Now, the fiat currency had already started to take place. See, this is what ends up happening when you think about it from Gresham's law, is that there was a gold currency already in play, the gold reserve currency. The world knew what it was. They all understood it. It had been used for thousands of years. And now it was very difficult to do transactions because the United States was hoarding the gold. So what ended up happening is the United States provided liquidity to the world. They said, hey, we got these Federal Reserve notes that we can issue out, and we promise we won't print too much, and you can redeem a certain amount of Federal Reserve notes for a certain amount of gold. And everybody was convinced of this. But there was two currencies at play, gold and fiat. And now nobody really thought differently of it. They did at the time. They didn't like it. They said, hey, this isn't going to work or whatever. There was a bunch of complaining that was done about it. And there was very little doubt in some people's minds that this was going to get abused. However, when people recognized that they could take a certain amount of dollars and transfer it for a certain amount of gold, and they knew that they could do that, they accepted the paper currency because it was available, and the availability of that paper currency gave them the ability to do transactions. And that's really what the people wanted. It doesn't matter if it's gold or if it's paper. They want to work. They want to eat. They want to sell their products. They want to do business. And if the business is done using currency and there's not enough gold out there to do it, then currency starts stepping in and making it happen. And if people don't think any differently of it, then it's accepted. It shares this symbiotic relationship. However, the gold starts to be depleted from the entire economy as more and more and more paper gets printed. More and more transactions begin to take place. Now gold can't replace the dollar anymore. Gold is getting hoarded away because the bad currency is now becoming very prevalent within the economy. So gold had the opportunity to stay there. The people could have said, no, we're not accepting the paper. But they weren't down for it. They were down for doing transactions. And so the more transactions that took place, the more demand for dollars that were out there, the less gold that would be available, and more paper was printed out there. Now, in order for the paper to come into existence, there was something very interesting that had to happen. And now there was warnings of this many years ago. As the Federal Reserve came into existence, the people were saying, the Federal Reserve will monetize the government debt. And the Federal Reserve says, oh no, we won't. That's exactly what ended up happening. Now, the Federal Reserve, when they print out money, they have a balance sheet, just like anybody else or any corporation would have. A balance sheet of assets and liabilities. Now, the liabilities is all the cash that's out there. The assets are things like gold, a little bit, SDRs, which is special drawing rights, a basket of currencies from the world, mortgage-backed securities, which is a group of securities that have been put into essentially like a box and sold off to an investor, the mortgage-backed securities, and then they have what is the most prevalent item on their balance sheet, and that is the U.S. Treasuries. So the U.S. Treasuries themselves are what backs the dollar, because that's what sits on the asset side of the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. So as the liabilities go out there, the cash, they have to purchase something of an asset, which is mostly U.S. Treasuries. And this is how the currency makes it out there into the system. Now, when you think about how this money is now moving through the economy, it moves not through the United States only, but then out to the rest of the world, because the rest of the world is doing transactions using something. It doesn't need to be US dollars, but it needs to be something. And now if there's not enough gold, then it needs to be something that is available out there, and US government debt-backed Federal Reserve notes is by far the most plentiful thing out there in order to do the transactions with. So now we think about it from this side of things. How does that fiat currency really make it out there to the rest of the world? And this is where Triffin's dilemma starts to come in. Because if you are a producing, saving nation, what you are doing is you are selling stuff and bringing in money. But if you are a debtor-consumer nation, like the United States is, then what you do is you issue out debt, U.S. Treasuries, right? You issue out debt, and you purchase the world's stuff. So now you're exporting money and importing stuff. The United States gets to freely spend money doing this. This is one of the reasons why the Federal Reserve note or the cash or the dollar or the U.S. Treasuries or anything that is very close to the U.S. dollar has become the world reserve currency, because it's plentiful enough for there to be enough to do transactions, which is all the world demand doing stuff, and the United States is willing to issue out that much debt and to go into that much deficit spending. No other nation is willing to do this. You think about it, all the other nations in the world want to be producers, savers. If you are a producing, saving nation, what that means is that you are productive with your agriculture, your commodities, your production, and you sell that stuff to the world. And then the world, sends you the money. That is a production, saving nation. All the BRICS nations want to be that. Now, if you want to be able to provide the world with enough currency in order to there to be enough to do transactions with, like the United States dollar is doing, then what you have to do is you have to be a deficit trade, meaning that you import stuff and you export dollars. No nation within the BRICS nations wants to do that position. All of them want to be the producer saver. So now here's the last part of this that you have to really consider. And that is that how many nations out there are willing to go into debt as deep as the United States has done? I'm sure some of them would be willing, but very few are capable of doing this. The United States by far has issued out more U.S. Treasury debt than any other nation in the history of time. And those U.S. Treasury debt is the assets that sit on the foreign banks' balance sheets. These reserves sit there and do transactions, sit there and do the backing of their currency. They are essentially what is the backbone of the entire global financial system in the way that people do transactions across the globe, and simply because it is so plentiful. If it wasn't there, then you wouldn't be able to use it to do transactions. All these other nations you would have to trust. You would have to trust China to go into deepest debt, the deepest debt possible, just like the United States has, and be able to retain the confidence that you're going to be paid back. That is very hard to do. And the United States was able to do it through somewhat of a trickery, where they were on the gold standard sharing this relationship with the dollar, or the dollar sharing a relationship with gold, only to eventually find that there was not enough gold in the system, but people wanted to continue to do work, continue to buy food, continued to sell their products. And since nothing else was available, the dollar grew to the level that it is today. In order for the BRICS nations to take over, the dollar would have to completely collapse. That's it. If the dollar completely collapses, the BRICS nations can take over, can start issuing out their currencies, can start going back to gold, start taking part in Thiers' law. But until the United States dollar completely collapses, Gresham's law will prevent the BRICS from ever making it. It'll arrest the BRICS. Uneducated economist, you guys let me know.